what I've heard from these players, what they've told me to a man, is that they need to be a lot better. And I'm not talking about the offense. Good morning to you. Good Friday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into hockey and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Penguins and Pirates in the same place that you found this. Steelers versus Broncos. That's a 4:25 p.m. Eastern Time kick in Denver. I'll be flying to Colorado tomorrow to cover that for DK Pittsburgh Sports, both in spoken and written form. And I'm loving the fact that the defensive guys seemed to take Atlanta harder than the offensive guys who didn't score a touchdown. Not that the offensive guys were satisfied or anything, but the defensive guys were sold. I mean 100% sold on the idea that they grossly underachieved against the Falcons. And yes, of course, I'm referring to the first half. And yes, of course, there were excuses to not be as sharp as possible in the first half when a lot of your best guys hadn't been part of any preseason games, when you were trying to develop right there on the field communication and chemistry, when you had Terrell Austin probably doing more mixing and matching and getting guys in and out, on and off, especially up front, than what we're used to seeing, when you had two stone-cold rookies out there in Beanie Bishop and Peyton Wilson. But they figured it out. And man, when they figured it out, it was game over. And I'll remind here, because I was doing this all summer long as well, that even though we seem to all talk about the offense about 80% of the time, and I'm no exception, probably 4 out of every 5 daily shots, it was always going to be the defense that would either make or break this team as far as being a contender. Because it's the defense, not the offense, that has a chance to be, I think, top 5 in the NFL. And if that sounds like hyperbole, let's start talking about who's part of this defense and what kind of impact they can have. My further belief is that this shouldn't change come Sunday. And that has almost as much to do with the opponent as it does with the Steelers. Start with Bo Nix. I get that, the kid is a dream come true to a lot of Denver fans, and I get that he's the hope for the future, that they're going to finally have their next John Elway or whatever. And he did some really neat things in the preseason. But this is going to be his second NFL start, meaning his second start against a non-vanilla, seriously advanced defense. Sean Payton himself said this week in Denver that, with all due respect to the Seahawks, this is a better defense, meaning Pittsburgh's. And even though the Broncos have spent a ton of money on their offensive line, that's been the hot topic across Colorado, because even though Nix was only sacked twice, which isn't bad, that's what Justin Fields was sacked in Atlanta, was pressured 18 times. That's the second most that any team allowed in the NFL in week 1. That's 36.7% of the dropback snaps. That's rough. I mean, the kids got it tough enough. Now add to this that Garrett Bowles, the starting left tackle, was hurt in that game, and as of yesterday was a limited participant in practice due to a calf injury. Peyton isn't saying anything about his status, but I will. He's going against TJ Watt, which means if he's limited in any way, you'd almost want him to play over who his backup would be. So what's this mean toward game planning? Well, they're not going to consult me, obviously, but I'm dialing up a whole lot of Nick Herbig and a lot of Herbig /3 OLB sets, meaning have Herbig, TJ, and Alex Highsmith out there at the same time. That did happen in Atlanta on occasion. Now, Mike Tomlin explained afterward that it happened only when they were going against the Falcons in what they thought would be no-brainer passing situations. But there's nothing to stop you from doing it even more often. if the Broncos had trouble stopping a standard pass rush from a middle-of-the-pack defense, I don't think Seattle would be much higher than that on anybody's list. Then what are they going to do against a team that was able to put all the pressure that the Steelers did on the Falcons without blitzing? Don't forget that part. They barely blitzed. Tomlin explained this too. Said that Kirk Cousins has always been effective against the blitz. They didn't want to give him that opportunity. So even in those late game situations when the Falcons had the ball and had a chance to go down the field and upend the score, you still saw 3, 4 on the pass rush and no more. But you also saw them get there. Get there with sacks, get there with heavy pressure that would force an interception, and they'd get there. They were like the anti-Myles Garrett, you know? They didn't just get to the backfield and look around to see how they could score their PFF points to make sure everybody noticed. No, they got there. Sorry, it's too easy. And man, now multiply all of that by getting there against a kid who's going to be seeing some really unfamiliar things before he gets the ball from center, and who's going to have people breathing down his neck in a way he never could have dreamed in college or preseason. As ever, I have no idea what to expect from the Steelers offense. I'd like to think some good things, but I don't know that I can yet. This? Come on. When we come back, J1Q. Luxenberg, Garbett, Kelly & George is a personal injury law firm in Western Pennsylvania that represents injured people in automobile accidents, workers' compensation cases, and medical malpractice claims. The attorneys at Luxenberg, Garbett, Kelly & George pride themselves in doing what they say they're going to do. It's important to them that when they make you a promise, they keep that promise. And this law firm has been keeping promises for over 80 years. Luxenberg, Garbett, Kelly & George has been AV rated. That's the highest rating a law firm can receive for legal ability and ethics. And the lawyers at the firm have been designated super lawyers, that's a real thing, for over 15 years. Rare combination there. Luxenberg, Garbett, Kelly & George has offices in Cranberry, Newcastle, Beaver Falls, Butler, and Elwood City. Learn more about them at lgkg.com or by calling 888-842-5454. Again, that's 888-842-5454. Today's J1Q comes from John, who says, "Hey DK, if Roman Wilson does play in Denver, I could see him catching the Broncos off guard a couple of times during the game because Denver's defense already has to focus on George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth. I know he missed a lot of time, but he should know the offensive plays, correct? Yeah, he'd better know the offensive plays, my friend. That's kind of non-optional when you're in September. Now, if what you mean is, does he know the plays and has he run enough reps to be familiar with them, I guess, in his sleep or something, we'll find out. And the thing that your question makes me think of that I think might be a thing, not just in Denver, but beyond, is that the Falcons really didn't make any extra effort to cover Pickens. There was some doubling, but not a ton. If you think about the big plays that George made, including one that was waved off, those weren't double coverage settings. And he wasn't even really being chipped at the line or anything. So that's kind of a curious call on Raheem Morris's part. But in going over some of the remarks from Sean Payton and the Broncos players this week, the way they're speaking of George, to me, strongly suggests he's going to face some unusual coverage. Now, that can mean one of two things. That can mean, obviously, double coverage or being chipped, or it can just mean having Patrick Surtain follow him wherever it is that he happens to line up. That is what Payton did last week against DK Metcalf, because, Surtain's really, really good. If either of those things happen, then all of those WR2 worries are going to arise all over again. Somebody else is going to have to do something else, and I don't think it can just be Freiermuth or the tight ends, plural. So repeating from yesterday that I really just don't want to pump up Wilson in week 2 when he's coming off a pretty lengthy injury and suggest that he's going to be some significant factor here Sunday. To me, if someone like that gets on the field and makes a couple catches for you, you're happy with it. And more important, he helps. But you are going to have to get something from your Calvin Austin, Van Jefferson level of wide receivers. There's not going to be a way to run and hide from that over a 17-game schedule. So yeah, baby steps for Wilson would be nice. George getting the best of Pat Surtain, I would take that too. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Steelers. We're going to do another one of these from Denver on Monday.